Whoa, what do you mean fixing the Battle of the Bastards? The best sequence in Game of Thrones. So many outstanding moments of spectacle and action, but if we're being real, the writing is not up to par. Jon's plot armor is exposed, everything rides on a deus ex machina, and the more you think about the overall plan and details, this idyllic battle in your mind melts away due to the presence of logic. For this video, I'm not going to attack the spectacle of this sequence because it's undeniably amazing. I'm only here to critique the writing and propose fixes with the intention of trying to make this epic battle even better. Just because something looks visually incredible doesn't mean it should be exempt from having a good script. So to dive right in, let's list out all the problems and tackle them one by one, and there will be two main categories. The issues external to the battle, like leading up to it, and the internal issues that happen within the battle. The first main external issue we should address is the Vale, and how their presence here doesn't make sense, along with them introducing a major plot hole, which is Moat Cailin. In order to access the north, you have to travel through the neck and thus this stronghold. Coincidentally, the Boltons occupy this location as established in Season 4 where Theon wins it back. We also see Moat Cailin in Season 5 where the Boltons establish a garrison there. So the problem here is Littlefinger nonchalantly saying that he has the Vale stationed at Moat Cailin.
I rode north with the Knights of the Vale to come to your aid. They are encamped at Moat Cailin as we speak.
For some context, this stronghold is extremely difficult to crack. In A Storm of Swords, Catelyn specifically says no army has ever taken this location while attacking from the south, and an engagement here would be madness. However, from Littlefinger's dialogue scene with Sansa, he doesn't even mention a battle at all. David and Dan seem to be quietly deleting the Bolton garrison there, so that the Vale could be conveniently offered to Sansa. Even if there was an engagement, it'd be questionable if the Vale would be able to overcome the stronghold, and even if they did, they'd incur heavy losses. Also, you can't go around because it's surrounded by impassable swamps that horses would definitely have a fun time trudging through, among many other deadly reasons. You may argue that the Boltons are still allied with Peter so they'd allow him through, but 1. Sansa ran off to the Night's Watch, so it shouldn't be hard to predict his new allegiance. 2. Roose Bolton died and so would his arrangements with Littlefinger. And 3. There's just a general veil over their geopolitical situation, so let's assume that they'd at the very least be too reluctant to allow the Vale into the north. And with that out of the way, there's actually an easy solution to the obstacle of Moat Cailin that also brings to light another plot hole, which is the fleet Stannis loaned to Jon Snow. After Hardhome, all these ships seemingly disappear, and I think David and Dan quite literally forgot they existed. Which is pretty insane because it's such a massive asset. With roughly 30 ships, you can transport armies around the continent. Jon was able to save about 4,000 to 5,000 wildlings with that fleet. If Jon wanted to and the offer of the Vale was still available, he could easily sail down the Gull Town to pick them up. This is where I'd make an additional change where Sansa becomes more transparent with Jon. She knows that getting past Moat Cailin isn't an option, so she comes to Jon with a proposal to send these ships to acquire the Vale. With this proposal, I would still keep the subplot of Brienne going to Riverrun. I know this was a relatively silly development, but it's a Hail Mary worth pursuing regardless, and it's honestly not that bad of an idea. Allow the Tully garrison safe passage and Jaime gets the kingdom. For this development though, I would still have it to where that doesn't work out, but the major change would be Brynden Tully doesn't unceremoniously die off screen. Such a legendary character deserves something better, and Brienne would smuggle him out of Riverrun and take him back to Castle Black. Even if Jaime saw that Bran was smuggling away the Blackfish, he would be too biased to send his troops after her, allowing them to get away since he already accomplished what he came to do. So now alongside the Vale, Brienne acquired a brilliant tactical mind that would be invaluable to Jon Snow for planning his upcoming battle. He may not be a big player in the show, but in the books, he was the mastermind behind the Whispering Woods. This now gives Jon someone who actually has experience in this setting, and he can learn from him. Also, with Brienne saving Brynden Tully, I feel like this would make way more sense for his character because it allows him to personally get revenge on the people that have caused all of this strife and misery for him. Why would he meaninglessly throw away his life fighting random Lannister soldiers when the opportunity is on the table to avenge Robb Stark, the young wolf, taking down the Boltons while also getting to see Sansa Stark reclaim her rightful home from these despicable traitors? To me, this is way more satisfying narratively, and we get to retain a great character, who by the way hasn't met Jon Snow before, so we get to explore new and unique interactions. This now actually makes Brienne's subplot matter because prior to this, it's entirely inconsequential and he may as well have just kept her at Castle Black. This wraps up things below the neck, so let's shift our focus to the northern region, where we include the participation of more northern houses, some of which aren't represented at all and are integral in the books. A puzzling aspect here is Davos declaring the Umbers, Karstarks, and Manderleys as the biggest houses, and then after that statement, they never really address the Manderleys again. Only Jon briefly saying they sent a raven, but if they're such a large house, it doesn't make sense to not go to them in person. A subplot we could introduce comes from A Dance of Dragons, where Davos goes to the Manderleys to recruit them to his cause. This would obviously be slightly changed because he's not working for Stannis anymore, and there's some great scenes in the books here, like Wyman Manderley's monologue about how much he hates the phrase. It's a bit long, but I promise it slaps. They watch me, sir. Day and night their eyes are on me, noses sniffing for some whiff of treachery. You saw them, the arrogant Sir Jared and his nephew Rhaegar, that smirking worm who wears a dragon's name. Behind them both stands Simon, clinking coins. That one has bought and paid for several of my servants and 2 of my knights. One of his wife's handmaids has found her way into the bed of my own fool. If Stannis wonders that my letters say so little, it is because I dare not even trust my maester. Foes and false friends are all around me, Lord Davos. They infest my city like roaches, and at night I feel them crawling all over me. I drink with Jared, jape with Simon, promise Rhaegar the hand of my own beloved granddaughter, but never think that means I have forgotten. The North remembers, Lord Davos. The North remembers, and the Mummer's farce is almost done. I condensed it a little bit, but you get the point. This very much stays in line with the general narrative through line of the North remembers, and actually makes it have more weight with more houses being impacted by the Red Wedding. I'd propose here that Jon sends out multiple envoys to the northern houses, and from there, Jon would carry out a heist to rescue Wyman's male heir from the Freys or Boltons. The show declares that he dies, but we can change this to him being taken hostage, since that's what happens in the books. For this heist, you can jerry-rig the Mance Rayder rescuing Gene Poole from Ramsay plot and apply that here. Tormund can lead that charge and take a band of spearwives similar to the books. This to me increases the participation amongst other houses, creates more depth in the world, and spawns a fun and exciting plotline. Whether or not you can make this expansion fit within a season of the show is very questionable, but at the end of the day, the later seasons are very rushed, and slowing things down to flesh out the story is always a positive. When you actually look at the amount of screen time Jon has leading up to the Battle of the Bastards, it's surprisingly really sparse. David and Dan literally do the bare minimum, and arguably worse than that at times. Another change that would make Season 6 even more faithful to the books that kind of repurposes a development would be Jon recruiting the mountain clans. Originally, he proposed this idea to Stannis in the books. However, if the show is pressed for screen time, then this plot could be optional, as the number of troops Jon gains from the northern houses and the Vale could already be plenty. But if we do go with this change, I think it would be really interesting to see how the mountain clans mesh with the free folk. Would they get along? Are their cultures and ideologies similar despite them living on either sides of the wall? There's some intriguing developments you could explore, along with being able to introduce whatever colorful characters you want. So far, I've accounted for every character within Castle Black except for one, and the last person is Melisandre. To me, it's important for every character to have agency and to actively pursue an objective, as that's how you create an authentic story, giving the sensation that your characters actually have free will and do things that affect the plot. In Season 6, after Jon's resurrection, Melisandre does nothing. She experiences something that would blow her fucking mind. She resurrected Jon Snow. This would be a massive resurgence to her faith in the Lord of Light, and from here, I think it would make sense for her to travel to the primary Red Temple in Volantis with an objective of pitching Jon Snow as Azor Ahai and trying to bring back support from the Fiery Hand, the 1,000 strong slave soldiers that protect any given Red Temple. Here, Melisandre can negotiate to bring back some of them to Westeros and join Jon's cause. This may be a bit unprecedented, but that's why she's negotiating. I know I'm already bogging down the narrative with a lot more developments, but this doesn't have to be a perspective we follow rigorously. Instead, something that happens primarily off-screen, or at most, we get a couple scenes which could also act as world building, where we get to see their main headquarters. Something we don't actually see throughout the show. If I were writing this, I would leave it a mystery as to whether or not Melisandre is successful here. Her returning takes longer than anticipated, and Jon would go forward with his assault. From here, I would have Melisandre return in the final episode, but is greeted with an angry and vitriolic Davos, given that he learns about Shireen. Now, Jon has an active, dire choice. Does he send away Melisandre, who has additional troops that are extremely loyal to his cause, or does he defy Davos's wishes and keep them? Giving this major moment bigger consequences and more depth with this new religion worming its way into an area that's faithful to the old gods. But this is venturing past fixing just the Battle of the Bastards. So overall, with these changes of recruiting more northern houses, getting the Blackfish, optionally the mountain clans, and gaining the Vale via Jon's fleet, the battle is now drastically skewed in Jon's favor. However, there's a solution to this that also solves Jon Umber randomly giving away Rickon despite Ramsay accepting his alliance already. What if, instead of having Rickon, Ramsay is apprehensive in trusting the Umbers? Because Greatjon and Robb were very close. It should be relatively assumed that the Umbers have cause to join Jon Snow. So to test their loyalty, Ramsay devises a scheme in which he knows Jon is going around trying to recruit different houses, so he implores Small Jon Umber to accept his call. Similar to a plot in A Dance of Dragons against Stannis, but that was with the Karstarks. So when the Umbers arrive, they gain Jon's trust, and after about a week, they massacre as much of his army as possible. This would be done by sending a fraction of the Umber army to Jon's assembled forces in strikes during the night, easily making up the difference in army sizes where Jon sustains heavy losses. This gives Small Jon Umber something to actually do, and for the audience to now hate his character. Maybe he even comes to befriend Jon, similar to Locke coincidentally, and from there, he betrays his trust. He's no longer a faceless chud on the battlefield who you entirely forget about by the time episode 9 rolls around, and now, you want to see him die. So, Jon's losses would be in the thousands, and his odds of winning are now lower than Ramsay's, but regardless, despite this grievous blow, Jon persists and carries on. From this point, we're basically done with all the external issues, and it's time for the Battle of the Bastards. Similar to how this battle opens in the show, I think it could be a cool twist in that it's revealed to us in this moment that Ramsay actually has Rickon. He secretly had him for quite some time given what we insinuate from his looks. This would be like a Reek book reveal where we're suddenly exposed to Rickon in which his hair is thinning, he's mutilated, malnourished, and missing fingers. Ramsay here demands that Jon Snow submits to him, and if he doesn't, he'll start flaying Rickon alive on the battlefield. This is a pretty diabolical change, but Ramsay's plan of luring out Jon is pretty devoid of logic, you could say. It's expectant of Jon riding out himself, which is just baffling because he could send anyone, and Rickon isn't really in danger because all he has to do is zigzag and not run in a straight line, thus decreasing the urgency of Jon putting himself in mortal danger to rescue him. That's why I think Ramsay would use Rickon to taunt Jon and further mess with his composure while Rickon's screams echo throughout the battlefield. This will be a constant haunting presence and will actively give Jon a great sense of urgency of fighting his way to Ramsay to stop him from torturing Rickon. From here, the actual battle starts, and since Jon isn't out of position, we technically don't get this cool shot of him facing down a cavalry charge. It may be one of the best shots in the series, but it's simultaneously the antithesis of what this show represents. Grounded, gritty realism where our characters sustain massive consequences for their actions. Jon surviving this moment should be impossible, and to be quite honest, I think Stannis Baratheon should have received this final shot, as it also implies his ending. So, since Jon wouldn't be blundering around out in the battlefield, he'll be fighting with a general formation. From the get-go, we'll have Brynden Tully and Tormund staying by Jon's side, and we could have some other minor background characters that perish within this group that we establish through our new developments. That covers everyone on the board, and the way in which this battle plays out I think is mostly fine. Realistically, Brynden Tully would probably come up with a better plan, but since I'm not a tactician and just have a film degree, let's use the way the battle unfolds from the show, as I have a solution to the Boltons flanking and encircling Jon's army. Instead of getting bailed out by the Vale, this is where 1-1 really comes into play. A change here would be to actually have armor and a weapon for 1-1. And to not go into the battle as if he's naked. Forging metal armor for a giant has never been done before, so it may be questionable if it's accomplishable, but if they can't work that out, then hide armor should be more doable. For his weapon, he could literally just rip a tree out of the ground and that would serve, or you can make him a big club with spikes on it like a huge Lucille from The Walking Dead. Since 1-1 is now upgraded and is a massive imposing force, he breaks through the line of shields and creates a big enough opening to exploit the enemy forces. So now Jon's troops are spilling out of the trap and are counterflanking the enemy. You could still have Jon getting suffocated by his own troops prior to this, and the thing that alleviates this is people flushing out of the circle. After this moment, instead of Tormund fighting Small Jon Umber, I think it would be more appropriate now if Jon fights him given their personal relationship and betrayal. A big part of battle sequences is establishing antagonists that you want your characters to fight. It creates exciting micro-duels that you're way more invested in outside of Jon mowing down random soldiers. This especially applies to the Watchers on the Wall as an example. For this duel with Small Jon Umber, he's surprisingly really skilled. Him and Jon Snow are seemingly matched, going back and forth until Jon suddenly gets struck in the shoulder by an arrow, incapacitating him and throwing him to the ground. Before getting killed by Small Jon, the Blackfish kills him and saves Jon Snow. While making sure Jon is okay, Brynden lowers his guard, and during this moment of vulnerability, he tragically gets stabbed in the back. The reason why I'd kill Brynden Tully here is because it acts as reparations for the damage caused by his niece, Catelyn Tully. He's saving the bastard that she couldn't love, making restitutions for her past. Brynden in this regard feels a sense of guilt for Jon and his upbringing. Now, whether or not you vaguely allude to this development could be lost during the action, but you could also give Brynden a final line of, "I'm sorry for what Cat did." From this point, the battle fizzles out and our characters pursue Ramsay into Winterfell. I almost forgot about Rickon, but while in that pursuit, they discover that Ramsay slit Rickon's throat before fleeing. The same set of events of them breaking into Winterfell plays out here, besides 1-1's underwhelming death. I feel like the main reason David and Dan killed him was because of budget cost reductions, and imagine how cool it would be if 1-1 survived until the Long Night and got to go toe-to-toe with an undead giant. It would cost the studio more money, but oh no! It's only like this is the biggest show of all time and is making them a fortune.
Can the Treasury bear such expense?
Then, after breaking in, instead of the weird Ramsay shooting arrows at Jon moment, I feel a more satisfying scene would be Ramsay using a sword. This is just a minor change and makes their fight actually feel like a duel. You could even have Jon kind of play with his food by slowly injuring and incapacitating Ramsay throughout their fight. Obviously, Jon wins, and that would be the end of the Battle of the Bastards. So in the case of deaths originally, 1-1 was the only good character that died, besides Rickon of course. While for my proposed fix, a way more substantial character dies in Brynden Tully, giving him an exponentially better death in my opinion. We actually get to see him fight and have a final moment of glory. Here's a graphic of all the changes we made, and let me know in the comments what you think about them, and if you want to join the channel Discord, we've been doing some fun shenanigans in there. I have over 2,000 movie rankings on Letterboxd, and I have a Patreon if you further want to support the channel. Thanks for watching the full video, and have a good day. Thanks as always to my legendary top patron Logan Farmer.